Right, that's started recording. Welcome everybody.
Recording. Okay, and I guess look, if you wouldn't want to turn your cameras off, it's a recording. That's totally down to you. I'm not going to tell you you need to or you don't need to. There's obviously the option of asking any questions through here. I'm sure you're all fairly proficient in Teams now, but there is a chat icon at the top. So the chat icon at the top, open that out, and then you'd be able to type your question in. So Steve will just monitor any questions that come in unless he's presenting, in which case I will. Equally, there's on the react button, you can raise your hand on there if you want to ask a question as well. So firstly, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. This is very much a joint collaboration, this project between, well, I should say from Careers and Enterprise Company, who are funding this project, and I'll explain why they're funding it and the rationale behind it at the moment. But on a local level within Hertfordshire, it's a really good opportunity for us to work with, I guess, initially with Anna and her team at Amazing Apprenticeships, who have completed a fantastic research piece for us, which lent itself very nicely into the main delivery part, where services for young people, our partners through Hertfordshire County Council, really come to the fore. But of course, that partnership and this project, it's fairly integral that we get really good buy-in, from schools or from targeted schools, and from all of you as employers to support this project. So I'll explain a little bit more about what this project is and the rationale behind it and how you might be able to support us. I mean, equally, you may watch this and think, well, actually, we haven't quite got the capacity to do it, but you may be just curious now. So that's absolutely fine. So no obligation really in taking this any further if it's not something that you think you can do justice to. Just for the sake of benefit, I think I know all of you on here, but sometimes when we try and match you up to your emails afterwards, we can't. So it would be helpful just in that chat if you could just put your name and your company that you're representing in there. That will help us just track that back. So if you wouldn't mind doing that as we go through, that will be helpful. So the Experience of the Workplace project is something that the Careers and Enterprise Company came to us with in the early part of summer and said that they in turn have been asked by the Department of Education ready to do a bit of a pilot piece into exploring what we probably know as Gatsby Benchmark 6. It's what sometimes mistakenly is known as work experience, that we're going to open up a little bit by calling it as a wraparound title, Experiences of the Workplace. So this is working on the basis that every young person benefits from gaining first-hand experience, physically going in to visit a workplace and gaining a better understanding of what that workplace looks like. So whether that is for them to decide, I want to be an accountant, I'm going to go and physically visit an accountant, or whether that is to just see what a working environment looks like, and that helps them at some point down the line make better career decisions. So there are three strands to this project. The one that we are involved in is, I suppose it's a compliment that we are involved in this one. So I think CEC called it something like the final third, but it was for 6 high achieving Gatsby Benchmark 6 hubs up around the country who have got really good Benchmark 6 scores, i.e. a significant majority of young people in schools are compliant with getting students out to workplaces. So equally, there are other hub areas that really struggle on this one. So we are not one of those ones. We are the ones that are high achieving. The graphic on that slide there just shows you that just over 75% of our schools can ensure that all of their students go out to achieve a workplace visit, which is great. But so we are now trying to work with that 24% of schools that aren't, and see if we can come up with some solutions to how you get those schools there. So hopefully further down the line, those other hubs around the country that maybe aren't quite at this level, they will be at this level. And then us and the other 5 hub areas will be working on ideas this year to try and demonstrate ideas or models for how you make sure you get the rest of those students through onto that project. So this to run throughout the entirety of the 2023-24 academic year. So that is up until July, or so what would be something like the 22nd of July next year. And our objective is to get around 2,000 young people to have an experience of a workplace visit. That doesn't mean, as Steve will come on to talk about, that they all do a 5-day work experience block, but it does mean that through a variety of different models and practices, they will get that opportunity to have that really meaningful and impactful visit to a workplace, which I'm sure you as employers have all facilitated over the years. And again, we really appreciate you being on this call or watching this video at the moment to find out a little bit more about it. So really, that is the premise and the background to the project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Steve now, who's going to give you a little bit more information and a bit of a deeper dive into what we mean by an experience of a workplace. So Steve, I'm going to hand over to you to take over. Just tell me when you want me to move the slide.
Thanks, Gareth. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Steve Trotter. I'm Careers Hub Operations Lead for Hertfordshire and work with the 111 schools in Hertfordshire and the colleges. We've got a great network of enterprise advisors. Some of you on the call today are business volunteers who we couldn't do this without you. And we've got a great team of enterprise coordinators that support you and the careers leaders in school. When it comes to Gatsby Benchmark 6 experiences of the workplace, what we're aiming to do is to get every young person an experience of the workplace before the age of 16, so year 11, and another one further repeated before the age of 18, year 13, sixth form or year 13 equivalent in college. So that is lots of different ways that we can do that, but in the past it's probably been labelled as work experience or 1 week or 2 week block work experience. So part of today and this project is to change people's perspective, language use of work experience to experience of the workplace. If you wouldn't mind going on to the next slide, that'd be great, Gareth. Thank you. So to enable this to happen and for 2,000 extra placements to happen, it's elongating out that work experience into other activities that happen in an employer's premises or place of work. So that could be a 1 to 3 day experience of the workplace instead of a 5-day or 10-day. It could be an extended work experience, a block placement that's extended so that maybe a student comes 1 day a week over an extended period of time. It could be a site tour or a visit to an employer's premises, and along the way, perhaps meeting 2 or 3 members of staff or having like a speed networking situation where you've got a few different employees within an organisation that the young people could meet. The employer visit is probably one of the easiest ones to accommodate, maybe having a minibus size amount of students coming to your premises, 10 or 12 students with some teacher support, and come along, have a tour, have a bit of a Q&A and get to know the business environment and the people that work there. Another way could be engaging alumni and going out to visit some alumni and local employers. Or other activities. So there's lots of people on this call that are within early talent HR sort of functions. So it could be that you host a mock assessment centre that helps develop young people's employability skills and teamwork development. Or again, it could be that pre-bit around getting ready to go into the world of work. So it could be employability, it could be LinkedIn sessions, it could be helping with applications or making them aware of the different opportunities within your organisation. So apprenticeship pathways versus graduate pathways, etc., etc. Along the way, we're trying to make sure that they're as meaningful as possible. They meet a range of people. It's a 2-way interactive process, so the opportunity to ask questions and perhaps the student performs a task. So you could set projects, just as another example of how this could be met. Next slide, if that's okay, Cara, thanks. So along the way, there's the aims to what is the young person trying to get out of this, trying to close the gap between students that are maybe from free school meal backgrounds or overcoming barriers, practical skills development, raising awareness so they know more than just inside their own family, They know about different types of roles, different types of organisations. They're starting to develop an awareness around recruitment processes and working practices. They could be developing skills, CV development, employability, raising their opportunity awareness, lots of different things. Next slide, please, Gareth. Also, something that some of you have been involved in along the way is the employer standards. So the employer standards have gone live last month, and how schools work towards the Gatsby benchmarks. There's now 9 employer standards. So in a moment, I'll put the link in to the employer standards in the chat. But from standard 1 to standard 6 are really relevant to experiences of the workplace. So providing a meaningful opportunity, being inclusive. Perhaps we're going to probably survey young people before they go out and survey young people when they come back from the placement to evaluate and improve. Again, within the opportunities that you offer, it could be that you're building in some skills or application or pathway awareness. So lots of opportunities to make this meaningful for you and make it meaningful for the young person. I think it's my last slide, Gary. And then how can we get the impact and share success? We want to do a lot of learning from this process. There's a great report that Anna's going to talk about in a minute, and that has already started to generate some really good learnings and some really good research information. Once we're doing these trialing of these methods, we want to reflect back and sort of look at the impact of them and share that success so that we've got a wider spread of people being aware of experiences of the workplace versus work experience. So can you do something that helps with skills? Can you help something that helps with application development and sharing that success with other people? And I think a bit later on, Gareth's going to look to some employers to talk a little bit about what they're doing already or what they're thinking of trying to do. But I'm going to hand over to Anna because I'm really excited. The research has been amazingly interesting, and Anna's going to bring that to life now. Thanks, Anna.
I will. Thank you. Thanks, Steve. And yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing what we've found, because over the last 6 weeks, we've been undertaking many interviews, focus groups, surveys. Many of you have been part of that. So thank you for your contributions. We've been able to bring together a really interesting report talking to employers of all sizes from across the county, schools and work experience placement providers or brokers as well, to build up a really interesting picture of Hertfordshire. I've got a slightly, I suppose, a vested interest because I'm an employer, a Hertfordshire employer like you are. So we offer work experience. I was keen to see where this goes as a small business, but also being a product of the Hertfordshire system many years ago. I think it was nearly 30 years ago that I would have done my work experience. But actually, I've got such fond memories of how that impacted me in my life. And I can still recall some of the activities I did on work experience. So absolutely see the value of it. So, Gareth, have you got my slides to share? Is that right?
I have, yeah. I was just going to
Super.
ask you, yeah, you just let me know when you want me to flick through them.
Yeah, super. So these look very wordy, don't they? Please try not to read them and I'll just try and talk to them instead. But what we've done through the executive summary is try to summarise the main findings against 4 key headings. So the first is around the perceived value of work experience and the positive impact it can have on a young person's aspirations. So these were the 4 themes actually that the CEC asked us to explore. So first of all, there is no doubt that everyone in Hertfordshire that we spoke to really values work experience, whether we were speaking to schools, teachers, careers advisors, or employers. You know, everyone can see the huge value that it can bring. Businesses really like being able to support local schools, their local community, and schools can really see as well the many benefits that it can bring their students being outside of that school environment. And you know, this was echoed in every interview that we had in terms of how it can help a young person to build their confidence, expose them to new environments, be in some of those difficult situations, having to navigate some of that new stuff about being in the workplace. So many, many benefits, which is a good platform, isn't it, to launch? Okay, so if we all love it, how could we improve it? When we were looking at work experience as well and the perception of the value of work experience, we've summarised it as this sentence: the focus is often on the coordination rather than the impact. And this is probably more heavily on schools, although there were some employers who, when we spoke to them and said, why are you doing it? Why are you investing all this money in work experience? They're like, yeah, good question, because actually it's not really feeding our talent pipeline. It's not really doing some of those things that you would expect perhaps a normal investment in an employer to have that return on investment. With schools, often a lot of the effort and the resource goes into the spreadsheets, the chasing students, the trying to liaise with employers, the paperwork, the health and safety. It's all of that coordination of the administration. And we felt through the interviews that there was less on the impact and less on the kind of how students are prepared for work experience and to make the most of it, but also how they are encouraged to reflect on the impact of that work experience placement, and whether that's done immediately after the placement or in the years that follow. Actually, there was almost a sense of a sigh of relief when it's over, and the schools were like, amazing, we got everyone out, they all came back, no one, there weren't any dramas, brilliant. And perhaps kind of that impact and reflection were an area that we might want to improve on. When we were looking at the models of work experience, it will be no surprise to you that the traditional model of 5 days is still the preferred model by schools. And when we tried to interrogate this a bit, part of it is tradition, and part of it is, if we were going to do anything different to that could be quite disruptive to our timetable. So although there are some schools who are starting to try different things, and I'll come on to that, the majority of schools that we spoke to were still offering 5-day placements towards the end of the summer term. And it was seen as one of those kind of wind down activities, perhaps, as we move into the summer months, with one particular school having it interchanged with school holidays so that families could decide to take an earlier holiday and then do work experience after. So some really interesting models of how schools are making this work. So both schools and employers, sorry, if I just go back one, Gareth, both schools and employers could see the benefit of offering shorter placements for students. And really some of the drivers for that from employers were around hybrid working, less resource and capacity in the office, in those kind of physical workspaces, but also with the kind of flexi working that lots of individuals may have now within their organisations, that perhaps we could achieve as much as we're achieving in 5 days if we were to look at some shorter opportunities. Although schools in the interviews could really see the benefits of having shorter days, I think their fear was around the disruption to the school timetable. We're used to 5 days. Some schools had, if they don't offer 5 days, maybe if they only offer 3 days, or if students are only able to participate in 3 days, they had filler activities that they might do with the students, work-related projects, that kind of thing. But again, completed from home and not necessarily under the supervision of an employer. We go to the next slide. I was really interested in kind of some of the schools trying to move their work experience weeks to earlier in the year. So we hear that kind of story, don't we? The rhetoric of, oh, it's always in June and July. And although probably the majority are in June and July, we do see some schools now bringing it forward as early as February, March and April. Some of the reasons for this were around prioritising work experience within the core timetable so that students realise how important it is, which I thought was really interesting. It's not being seen as a bolt-on or a wind-down activity, or that kind of summer month type stuff. Actually, it's really intrinsic to the work that you're doing, bringing it forward in the year. But also reducing competition with other schools for placements with local businesses. So really trying to think about, if we're all going for the same week in June, that's really difficult for local employers. So maybe if we do something different, we won't find it as hard to find those high quality placements. And then on the flip side of that, sometimes employers will set their own dates for work experience, not necessarily in line with school calendars at all, but they will look at their business, they'll look at their capacity and what they're able to support, and then we'll just say, well, that's going to be our week of work experience, and we'll offer it out publicly, and whoever wants to apply to come on it is welcome to apply. And there's anything in between, lots of flexibility, particularly from employers saying we will respond to whatever it is that schools need. Next one. So next we looked at the identification of barriers that might prevent schools, young people and employers from being able to provide the most impactful work experience programme. So trying to keep that eye on impact as well as just offering placements. So the majority of schools now do use a self-source model. This is the term we've given it, where students are really encouraged to use their own personal networks or to reach out to employers themselves to try and find placements. Some schools were keen to kind of say, you know, this is a really good skill for them to have to communicate with a local employer and write letters and pick up the phone. Of course it is, but it also reduces the cost and the administrative burden if students are able to find their own. And there was a real sense of the financial implications of being able to do a really robust and brilliant job on this. Schools just don't have the resources anymore. All schools would talk to us about less advantaged students, therefore struggling to find higher quality placements. So perhaps if they've got parents that don't work, or if they don't have those personal connections into industry, or if they can't afford the travel costs, then schools were reporting that it can be more difficult to find placement opportunities for those students. In terms of the kind of employer engagement around things, you know, most schools kept a list of local employers. Some schools were much more advanced in their employer engagement activities than others. Some approached it in a far more kind of business-like business development type model in keeping employers warm and trying to make sure that they offered placements year on year, whereas other schools would almost approach it like a fresh task each year, perhaps with a small spreadsheet of employers to continue with. And finally, sourcing high quality placements for students with additional needs was an area of concern. That's it, just at the bottom of this slide. So a lot of schools kind of reporting that where there were students that they were going to struggle to put on placement, they were worried about making sure that it was really meaningful for that young person and that they were finding placements that were linked to things that that young person is interested in. They felt that often they might be relying on retail and primary schools and care homes. And of course, they can be brilliant, but they felt that perhaps there just wasn't that connection to what that young person wants to go on to do. We move on to the next one. Sorry, back one. Don't know why these are jumping forward. Sorry, guys. There was on all sides, I would say, one of the other barriers was around employers wanting students to be better prepared for the placements so that it could be more impactful. So a number of employers talked to us about wanting students to be able to do pre-research on the organisation, find out about what we offer and just be interested, come with a level of enthusiasm that tells us that you want to be here and you want to talk to different people in different roles and really how to make the most of it. When we then talk to schools about the different activities that they undertake to try and prepare students for placement, it really did depend on the resource that was available within the schools. One school spoke to us and said, literally, I have 2 assembly slots of 30 minutes to get my students ready for work experience. So everything else is digital and trying to kind of squeeze messaging into form tutor type reports, you know, and sessions. Other schools were saying, oh, we start this in year 9 and we bring in all our parents and we do this, that and the other, and had a really different model. So yeah, if we just move on to the final slide. What we've done in terms of suggestions for alternatives or new approaches is group these into 2 areas: practical ways that we might be able to boost experiences of the workplace, so different things that we could be able to do, and some ideas for collaborative working. So actually, if we move on to the next slide, Gareth, I prefer the way this is shown visually. I don't like lots of words. So along the bottom, this is the collaboration piece. So we felt that there could be a need for some facilitated best practice sessions to share what works for schools and employers through the interviews, where we were able to share, you know, a school or an employer might share something that they felt they needed to improve. We could then give them examples of what other employers in the county are doing. They go, oh, that's brilliant. Oh, that's a great idea. I'll take that one. And we also saw that in the focus groups as well. So perhaps we could create some opportunities in the county to share some of what works, because we're all trying to achieve the same thing. Perhaps we could offer some training and guidance for schools and employers focused on purpose and benefits. So something that's really focusing more on the why rather than the administration and the coordination. A number of schools shared that they might look to implement or reintroduce work shadowing for younger year groups, particularly for years 7, 8 and 9. Some schools were really new to this, and we've got other schools in the county that have been doing this for quite a while. So could we bring them together and again offer that training or some facilitated guidance for them on how to get that going in your school? We feel that there could be, again, some similar theme around building lasting relationships with local employers, and some schools that are really nailing this. Often where they've got a careers leader who's come from industry, they approach it as a business development task, and you can really see the difference in schools that are connecting employers in throughout the year in multiple ways and building that relationship, rather than just emailing once a year to say, can you take some of our kids on placement again, please? And perhaps something around the delivery of an enhanced planning and reflection session for students to really help them to think about the impact of the placement. So how do we get them to plan for where they're going? How do we get them to reflect upon what they're doing? In terms of some of the practical ideas, there are 5 that we've picked out. So perhaps we could do something around trialling different methods and models. So 1 to 3 days, a half-day visit for groups of students, a rotation model where students could move perhaps every day from employer to employer, giving greater access. Sorry, my Teams thing's going off in the corner. Focus on creating meaningful placements for disadvantaged students. So trying to really address where schools feel that those students who either don't have that social capital, or perhaps there are concerns around behaviour or additional needs even, that means that perhaps we feel they're not getting access to the best placements that we could give them. Trying to support the growth in work shadowing and or take your child to work days for the younger year groups, because if we could start some of this earlier, it might take some of the pressure then off of having to do 5 days in year 10 or 5 days in year 12, if it becomes more kind of normalised throughout the younger year groups. We could do an employer campaign to source placements. Interestingly, when employers were asked, and we did survey employers to say, do you offer work experience? And if they said no, it wasn't because they've had a negative experience previously, and I'll be honest, that's kind of what I was expecting to come through. It actually was because they've never been asked. So again, there's an opportunity, isn't there, to engage some of our newer employers to the county to see if they might like to get on board with this. And then finally, we felt that there could be something around supporting schools to develop a meaningful work-related task to support students around new skills development. So if an employer can't offer 5 days, or a student isn't able to undertake 5 days, what could we do on those other days that is really meaningful and linked in with all of this? So that's a real brief summary of some of the stuff that we found through the report, but I'm sure the full report will get shared with you, and yeah, hopefully that is of interest. So shall we bring it? Oh, do you want me to take questions, Gareth, or should we lead straight into presentations?
Yeah, no, let's take some questions also coming through.
Okay.
So, Helen.
Hi, Helen.
Hi, Anna. Yeah, just wondered on the report whether you split it down into district, or like the schools you've spoken to and the employers.
We didn't, although for the employers that participated in the survey, we've done a pin map, so you can see of those employers that responded where they are. But no, we haven't, for, I suppose, a little bit for anonymity, we haven't listed who participated in the research because it was a fairly small group as well.
Okay. And I presume it's closed now, so there's no option to include other businesses in the survey, or?
No, I would say this element of the research is complete for now.
Okay.
Is that fair, Gareth?
Yeah, no, that's fair, and so I would say that, you know, the research piece is incredibly insightful for us, not just, I think, within the prism of this project, which, and you know, that research drives what's going to happen next, but I think looking into the you know, further into the future and beyond the prism of this project, I think this research will be really helpful for us, for schools, for employers, and for providers as well. So yeah, what we wanted to do now, we just wanted to invite a couple of employers who have got programs or about thinking about programs, just to talk you through what they are thinking of or what they've done beforehand. So first of all, we're going to invite Natalie from Wilmot Dixon to come on, because you've got very well tried and tested I'm going to say experience of workplace project, which we're going to by
Yeah.
default is a work experience project. So Nassie,
Yeah.
do you just want to explain what you guys have done?
Yeah, so at Wilmot Dixon, we had historically, prior to COVID, just taken ad hoc requests from people, and we could accommodate that to a point, but it was always quite challenging to have one person, then you'd have another person the following week. So that was quite labour intensive on our teams based in our office. So once we came back after COVID, our working pattern looked very, very different, and we have teams. We can probably get about 200 people in our building. You're lucky if there's about 30 on any given day, to be perfectly honest with you. So we had to think about something different. So I came up with the concept of something called the Hub Challenge, which we did this year, and we did that the last week of the summer term. And we hosted 30 students it was 4 days, but it will be 5 days going forward. So they were set a project. They worked in project teams. So they worked with young people from across schools from Hertfordshire and Beds. We had more Hertfordshire schools focused, to be honest, because we're a Hertfordshire employer. And to get them all on board, so it was more like being in the workplace. And so they had to work with teams, people they'd never worked with before, although there were some people that they may have known, but we made sure that, or correction, I made sure that they weren't with people that they actually knew on a regular basis or were in lessons with. So I think so it just looked like that they were creating a new team going forward. So they had to build on sort of that personality and how they were all going to gel together. So we had lots of tasks, we had some team building activities, we had lots and lots of engagement from all of our own people coming in, having discussions about different job roles. So they had to work on a project, they were given a budget, they were given a whole design package and where they needed to get information from. Each team had a laptop that they worked on, and most of their day was actually spent on the project work, but it was interspersed with people coming in and talking to them. We had our directors involved. They came and spoke about their career journeys. We had a virtual site tour, so we were all in the boardroom, and then we actually visited a live site. So they could ask questions, and at any point all the way through, and we were checking in on them every morning, how were they feeling from one day to the next. So it was making sure, because everything we do, we have to check on how impactful it is with the young people or anyone we're working with. So it was constantly checking in on that. They had to then do a presentation of what they'd created, their budget, had they come in under budget, things about their logistics, if they'd thought about that, what they were going to offer that community that they were actually building for. So they had a very, very tailored brief that they had to work towards and things they had to consider. So there was lots of questions, but the presentations were phenomenal, and we created a film off the back of that as well. And I think because we were constantly checking in with them, they felt supported and they felt that they were. And in the middle of the week, we did a networking event where we had our people and people from outside of our business, so our wider supply chain, all came in, and they all had to have a minimum of 3 conversations with different people. So it was about 220 hours of volunteering and across the week, and we probably had over 50 people involved and 30 students. So it was, and that's going to be our model going forward for our Hitchin office. We still offer that ad hoc work experience for sites, depending on what we have in Hertfordshire or what we have on our sites. We'll still continue to do that, because that tends to be, but we have to be very, very sure that those young people really want to see what our industry is like. Whereas we took 14 to 18-year-olds on this on the Hub Challenge, and actually you probably couldn't tell who was 14 and who was 18, because they actually felt like young business people, and it was amazing to see them all shine. And they've all come out with, we got great feedback from them, and I think from their parents as well. So and the schools. So for me, it feels like it's the right thing to do, because we can get everyone there for a week. We can get most of our people in for that week, and we can target it with our architects, our design practices that we work with. So they get to meet so many people. Off the back of this, I've had one of those young people come and do a presentation with me at the Priory about his experience. I've had a number of the students have actually gone back into school, the year 10s, and spoken to their wider peers about actually everyone should have done this, but it's quite hard because I think we're looking at maybe trying to run one again in London as well, with some of our sites, so we can take that in. So we may do 2 a year, but we'll only probably have the one in Hertfordshire, which will be, I may be able to do it for 40 students this year, but I think that would be our maximum for a week. So that's, and we've done some insight days where we've had, I can't remember what they were called, Gareth. It was like a partnership that we worked with, and I think we had a small group from the Priory come over, and they came for visits. But there was a certain, I can't remember what they were called as a.
It was the Effective Transition Fund project.
That's right.
So it was a group of students.
Yeah. So I think the Priory one was really successful. So we've done a number of those at our sites where we do insight days. But I think that's something else that we could look at offering. A small group of students to come on a more regular basis from certain schools. So that is something we're looking at, because that helps build our people's CPD as well. So it wouldn't necessarily just be me running all of those. We'd be able to, they could come in and look at design, and we could have a design team one, we could have one with the commercial team. So we'd be able to do a couple of those sort of morning or afternoon sessions definitely throughout the year. So that's something else that I'm looking at trying to structure in. As the Hitchin hub, really, as us as being a Hitchin based office, and for that office to actually be much more productive with that. So
I love that approach, Natalie, because then you're doing like a aspiration inspiration when they're coming in for visits, and then the skill development through the hub challenge. You're kind of coming at it from different angles. I really like that.
That's it. So I think I don't think one size fits all. I think that's the problem, because if you're not offering something, it's quite difficult, because obviously schools want them out at a certain time of year. I understand why, as being an ex-educator, I do understand that. But the problem, and Anna's picked up on that actually for an employer to not get feedback when you've hosted someone can be quite depressing in a way, because you don't know what impact you've had. I mean, I collate impact, that I'll send an impact form for the young people to fill out, but then you don't kind of know where they're going to go with that in school, and what school will do with that information. So actually, if that is being developed, then that could be even better, because as employers, we all need to create and demonstrate the impact that we have in communities where we work. So that piece probably could entice more people to offer work experience, is what I would think.
Yeah. Okay, Natalie, thanks so much for sharing that, and hopefully that's that's some sort of inspiration or some food for thought for any of you watching this at the moment. Also, just want to hear from Diane and Amy from DLRC, and please take this as a compliment. I think this is how you worded it to me, Diane, but this is a sort of a beautifully simple approach that you've got in mind here. So do you just want to explain a little bit about what you'd come up with? Because I think as a smaller organisation, it's important that we hear about sort of scales and scopes.
Okay, well, I think first, Amy is just going to go through quickly what we did last year, because we had our first, this year, I mean last school year, we had our first actual work experience people coming in, because we've had bring your child to work days, bring your daughter to work, we've had interns, but this was the first time that we actually had like sixth formers coming in that weren't related to the company in any way whatsoever.
Yeah, so we had 2 students come in, and it was spread over 3 full days of work, and they basically split their time between doing a small project, I think it was a marketing project, and then the rest of the day was split between having meetings and meeting various members of staff from the various different departments who have different routes into their career, just to again broaden their sort of knowledge of the people who work at our company, what they do, because we've got all our technical side, and then 20% of our staff are all supporting staff, IT, admin, HR. So they get an idea about how a company is structured and their routes into the various different aspects of it. And we sent out a feedback form to the students and got some really nice feedback of having a mix of doing work and meeting the wider team as well. So yeah, all positive, hopefully.
So then we heard about this experience of the workplace, and we just sort of thought that we could bring a big group of students in. They could sit in the boardroom, and then people come in to see them. But they could also go around and just see people managing emails, because that is, I mean, that is what half my day is managing emails, and students want to know what they did. I remember being in the sixth form and saying to my dad, what do you actually do at work? Because I couldn't envisage what he actually did. And he said, I think. And I thought that's really too abstract for me to understand. But what he meant was, I review reports that other people have written and I make comments on them. But I never got that from him. So I think, you know, that's what I would have wanted to know when I was a teenager. Like, what do you actually do at work? And just seeing that, you know, how people like seeing people in a meeting, or seeing people, you know, how they interact in a meeting, but then meeting people. And I think one of the important things is that I mean, not all school children, but a lot of them, when they would come into a workplace, would be quite shy. Sometimes they're silly because they're shy, but make them all sit down in a circle and introduce themselves like we do in a meeting. So when I go into meetings with new companies, for example, that we're going to be offering services to, we go around the table and introduce ourselves. So I think, you know, getting used to doing something like that, that is an expectation in the workplace, especially, you know, in the area that we work in. And I mean, I really like this idea of potentially getting people in from, you know, we have some local clients that, you know, we could even get them involved in doing some of the work placement stuff. So some of our clients work at Stevenage Bioscience Catalyst, for example, and that's just down the road at Glaxo, at the Glaxo site in Stevenage. So yeah, there's all sorts of things that I think that we could do to get them to understand, you know, what you actually do at work. Yeah, I think that's probably all I wanted to say about that.
Thank you. Look, it's so it's a very simple and straightforward model, Diane, but clearly that's can be and will be very, very impactful, and there'll be huge benefit that any of the young people get from taking part in such a day. And I think also the beauty of that is it's really replicable. So particularly for those of you who are watching this, if you're a smaller company, you will potentially more likely have the capacity to deliver on that. Going to hand over now to Natalie from Services for Young People, just to talk you through sort of the practical steps. One point I just really want to emphasise, though, that it's probably remiss of me not to have said from the start, is anything that you agreed to support with us here, we want this to be additional and not to replace any commitment you might already have made to a school or to Services for Young People or any other providers. So this is to be additional, so it's something that we can pilot separately. Okay, I will just make a reminder of that when I just give you sort of final steps at the end. But Natalie, over to you. I will put the slides up again. So if you just want to tell me when you want me to move them on.
Go for it, lovely.
Over to you.
Thank you, Gareth. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I'm just going to talk through a bit about Services for Young People, who we are and kind of our involvement in the project. My name's Natalie Webb. I'm going to be working on this project alongside my colleague Gemma South, who unfortunately isn't here today. Her daughter's not very well, but you'll be hearing kind of from both of us as in equal measure, kind of as the project goes on. So Services for Young People, we're part of Herts County Council. Some of you may know us, have had involvement with us, especially if you've offered a work experience placement in the past. We do. We are kind of the main provider of the traditional 5-day block work experience to schools across Hertfordshire. We also do other things, youth work projects. We offer information, advice and guidance, other work related learning events such as careers carousels, work shadowing, workplace tours, mock interviews, that kind of thing. Anything where you kind of have an employer in a school and they want to come together. We've kind of been involved in that in the past. Both myself and Gemma have worked for Services for Young People for a long time and actually have backgrounds in the coordination of the block work experience in our previous roles. And we've both been enterprise coordinators at the very kind of inception of the Careers Enterprise Company a number of years ago. So we've been around. So you might have heard of us, might have seen us. And yeah, so we're lucky enough we're going to be working alongside this project with kind of Gareth and Steve. Thanks, Gareth. Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. You can click over to that one. Next one. Thank you. So the next steps, or the main thing that we really want to try and do is, obviously we've heard some great examples there from DLRC and Wilmot Dixon about what they already do, and we want to capture that information on a wider scale. So we've created a survey that is live, actually has gone live now, so I'll pop the link in the chat shortly, and then we'll send that out on email as well to those colleagues that you might want to share this with. The idea is we want to capture what you're already doing, what you want to do, and so we can then start to look at how we can help support that, how we can put together activities and events that work for you and work for the young people. The survey will capture kind of your interest, your availability, and kind of any good practice that you're already doing. We'll go through kind of your existing health and safety policies and procedures, and something that Services for Young People do with all employers that we work with is a little visit. We'll come down to you, have a look at your we'll kind of ask you some questions about your policies, procedures, check you've got the correct insurances in place. One thing to stress is there's nothing extra that you need to put in place. It's all everything that you should have to run your business. We're just checking that it's already there, mainly around insurances and that kind of thing. So there's a couple of questions in the survey just to capture that. If there's anything that you feel you don't have, we can also support to put that in place. We can signpost you to any documents or any websites that might help you get that in place, but I'm sure you're already fine with that. So like I said, the survey's gone live now, and it's going to run until midnight on the 22nd of December, so it's quite short, but obviously this period before Christmas we wanted to capture as much information as we could so we can then start evaluating that in the new year. The survey will also ask if there's any specific demographics that you would like to reach out to. So we've spoken a little bit about young people with, on free school meals, or young people with special educational needs, and equally it'll ask you if there's any groups of people that you can't offer to for any reasons, maybe those that are under 16 or under 18. So if you can just put as much information about that in the survey as possible, so we can do the relevant kind of matching, prepping the events and linking you with the schools. And that's basically our role in this, is that we will help you set up the events and the activities, and then link them to the schools, and ensure that the young people are prepared for the opportunities that you're going to be offering. And we will be surveying them before and after to capture any feedback, to measure that impact, because it's something that I've heard over the years time and time again from employers as well, that enough of that isn't done. And I'm really pleased, Anna, that was captured in your research, because it is so important. And I think the schools that tend to have their traditional 5-day block work experience at the end of term, they all go off for the summer break, come back in September, it's a new year, they've all forgotten about work experience, and that information isn't captured. So we really want to make sure that we survey them before and after, and then we give you that feedback, and we look at kind of how this pilot can be hopefully expanded in future. Next slide, Gareth, please. Lovely. I think I've touched upon this already, but just kind of the Services for Young People support and the facilitation that we're able to do. So it's mainly around the coordination, the planning of activities, the liaison between yourselves and the schools, ensuring that the students are prepared, the logistical factors, you know, them all getting on a minibus and getting to you. That's our role, to work that out with the schools. We've got lots of templates for activities, so whether that's just an example 1-week template for how to have them on a work experience placement, or how to do a mock interview day, how to set up a careers event or a workplace tour. We've got lots of templates that we can share with you to make that run as smoothly as possible. Sharing the best practice and capturing that feedback, that's our role as well. And any guidance in relation to the best practice when working with young people, health and safety, that kind of thing. I think that was it. So any questions, or Gareth, did you want to capture questions for the whole session?
Yeah, so thanks, Natalie. That's really great, and hopefully that just explains to you practically what the next steps are. Are there any general questions? I'm going to just sort of close with a slide just with some sort of key points and reminders for next steps. But before I do that, just keen to see if anyone's got any questions beforehand.
Natalie, when you share the survey, are you able to share either your or Gemma's email? Just if there's anyone got any quick questions, it might be easy just to come to you via email if that's all right.
Absolutely, I'll pop it all in the chat now. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Natalie.
Stuart, you had your hand up and you put it down. Your question gone? Yeah. Okay. So just a few key points then, just to remind you of on that. So the fact that you're on the call today is fantastic. There is no obligation for you to proceed with it. We will only badger you 17 times before we give up from now on in. But so as Natalie said, you will be, everyone who's on this call or that we sent the original email out will receive that link to complete the survey, and that will help us to ascertain your interest in the project. We will send it out to our wider employer sort of network, so that's all of our cornerstone employers. That will also be our enterprise advisor network, certainly for those enterprise advisors that work for a company, aren't just doing it by them, working for themselves. So there is scope for innovation and creativity within your model. This isn't a one size fits all. There are different ways, and you've heard a couple of examples of what those might look like, as long as, and I think Steve posted the link in there, it's just around making sure that activity is meaningful. So just one thing I should have emphasized on here, these can't be virtual experiences. So we've specifically been told by CEC through this strand that these are not around providing virtual encounters. So this needs to be physically young people and groups of students and/or groups of students turning up in person at your workplace. So just to re-emphasize, any support should be additional and not replace any pre-existing or pre-planned careers inspiration activities. So if you've already said to a school, yeah, we'll take on 5 students on work experience, please don't go back to them and say, well, we're doing this one now instead. If you've already made that obligation and commitment to them, do go through with that one. Equally, if you're normally on that list and you've probably already spoken to about providing work experience placements through services for young people or any other providers, please do fulfill on those obligations and look at anything you do through this project as additional. Didn't really talk about the schools that were involved. There are about 50 schools that are involved. There was a criteria for that, which was based very specifically on their benchmark 6 attainment in summer term. Now, clearly that is dynamic and schools do go up or down a little bit. We have contacted those, say, approximately 50 schools that were on our list who either weren't fully achieving benchmark 6 or were on 100%, but within that, when we've had access to the granular level of detail, they've got to 100%, but they've done it without every single one of their students, or the marking that every single one of those students gets an experience of a workplace within that school program. But you do have the ability, so some of you may have specific schools that you want to work with, so perhaps it is your local school or you're already supporting them as an enterprise advisor, so you can mark that down. Equally, you might have a particular type of school, so you might want to work with a education support centre or with an SEN school, or you might want to work with a school in your town or area. So you will have the capacity and ability to do that. I mean, clearly we aren't going to be sending school students from Watford to a workplace in Bishop Stortford, because that's not going to work. So there will be a local sort of theme around how that matching service is. So Natalie's introduced herself, so her and her colleague Gemma will be managing that process through the matching to the activity itself. All experiences need to have taken place by the end of school term in July, and they need to take place during school hours, so they can't be offered during, for example, Easter break or during the May half term. And there will be a survey and evaluation for participating employers to complete pre and post activity, or at least I'm highly anticipating that there will be. So I think it's probably, just to manage expectations, best to say that will take place as part of the project. Okay, so firstly, colleagues, is there anything that I've missed that you think needs to be raised at this point? And secondly, so for any of you that are watching this live at the moment, if you do have any questions or want to sort of raise hands, please do so now. So Steve, if I could ask you to stop the recording. which then gives me the ability to ask you if